Welcome to Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. I'm your host for this session. I'm Sean.
And I'm Kevin.
And together we're going to talk about a unique problem that you might be having in your sales process and your sales world. This 15 minutes is designed for salespeople, sales managers, and CEOs of the company that are trying to increase their revenue and trying to be more productive in your sales processes. So let's get started. Kevin, welcome back to talking about sales for Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. Kevin, I would like to talk about when a top performer on your team is stuck in a slump. Their revenue is not doing as well as they expected. They're struggling. They have to get cheered up a little bit. I'm sure you've had that happen where you've had somebody on your team that's gone through that. Let's talk about that. What have you done to help a salesperson get through that and get back on track?
This is a tough topic, especially when you're talking about a top performer. What have I done when I've had somebody who's below the line of sorts? And for all the sales leaders and salespeople listening out there, we all probably have stories around this. But the thing I want to harken back to is our sales process, our sales strategy is a time-based one. This is not transactional selling we're talking about. We are talking about people in a profession, sales, selling to other businesses, and that takes time. As sales leaders, I say it's first incumbent upon us to point out when the sales trend changes, when it starts to slide. If you're a CEO listening to this, you're probably thinking immediately, oh, that's reflected only in revenue. And while you're right, I would also want to point your thinking back towards the early stages of a sale. If you knew that you didn't have enough leads or enough relationships that were active in your pipeline, you could probably forecast your slump and take earlier actions as a sales leader to change outcomes. That's one approach here. Any other initial thoughts there, Sean?
When a salesperson is upset, it's when the revenue is not coming in, but that's after or post all of this effort has actually happened. And that's when they're actually seeing it, when they're feeling it. And maybe they're feeling it because they lost a deal that they didn't expect to lose. They thought they were winning. They didn't see it. One of the things that I like to do is to reinforce, look, you are doing all of the things correctly in the system. Yes, this one deal, we thought we were going to get it. It went south on us at the last minute. Let's do a little bit of understanding what happened during that deal so we can learn from it. But look at all the other things you're doing that are good. Look at all the scoping meetings you've had that you really understood what's going on. All of those are going to turn into revenue. And sure, maybe you were counting on that deal and maybe there's going to be a short-term blip on the revenue, but that's not really a slump if you're doing all of the right things every day. In another podcast earlier, we talked about doing all the blocking and tackling to kind of keep yourself going. If you've done all those blocking and tackling things, you're going to work yourself out of that slump relatively quickly, just as soon as that next deal gets to the process of being closable. I like to remind my salespeople, don't worry about that one deal that went south. We're going to learn from that, but worry about, did you do all of the things in the process to build an effective pipeline along the way? What you said earlier makes a lot of sense, though. If you haven't been doing those things, that's why we're in the slump. Now, let's work on the blocking and tackling. Let's get those things done. Let's make sure we're doing good scoping calls. Let's make sure we're doing good discovery calls. Let's make sure we're asking to talk to the economic buyer and we have good reasons to talk to the economic buyer. Let's get all that stuff done because those are the reasons why we're going to close a deal in the future.
Absolutely. When I think about all of the successes in the past and all of the starting points that we had to build from to get to the success, more times than not, especially when I'm working with business leaders and sales leaders and seasoned professionals, when we start to pull back the covers on their pipelines and say, let's take an intellectually honest approach to how sound is your pipeline. And I'm stealing that term, intellectually honest approach to pipeline management, from a friend of ours down in Atlanta, Jim Costello. But the intellectually honest approach is really a great kind of Kickstarter for evaluating the health of your pipeline. If I can look at anybody's pipeline right now and say, what's your close rate? Last 12 months, the total number of deals opened is the denominator and the total number of deals closed, 1, is your numerator. There's your percentage. And if you've got a 5%, 10%, 30% close rate, doesn't matter what the percentages are, When you have a known average close rate, you can look at the number and the dollars that you have in your pipeline and know very quickly how healthy you are. Without that kind of base level knowledge, it's really hard to fight back from a slump. When I'm looking at how do you lead a top performer, that's actually where I start. I don't start at how many you've got in verbal or commit or whatever late stage you're measuring by. I start with the early stuff because then I also know about how many days on average it takes to pull some prospect through a sales pipeline. If I'm armed with those two pieces of knowledge, I can be really effective really fast in driving results in a business.
Great point. And you're right. Let's take an intellectually honest approach to looking at what's going on in our lives. What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? And as a sales leader, you need to work with your salesperson that does feel like they're in a slump. Or maybe they've always been in a slump. Maybe you inherited this team or you're new to the company and now you're working with the team for the first time. And there's this salesperson that seems to be smart, seems to know what's going on, seems to have all the things together, but they just can't bring in any revenue. What you really need is, are they doing those basic things? Are they doing all the things correctly? Are they following a process? Or do they feel like I'm better than the process? I'm going to go outside of the process. I'm going to do whatever I need to do, and I'm going to do whatever the customer tells me to do. And then you're surprised when the deal goes south. Come on now. Let's be honest about this. Sales is not filled with silver bullets. And another way to say this, I have my clients come to me and say, Sean, what is the silver bullet for sales? What's the secret thing for sales? I go, there's only one secret thing. There's only one silver bullet, and that is hard work. That's the only thing that is always successful. Now, your product has to work. Your territory has to be adequate for selling that product. All those things have to be true. But the thing that doesn't allow you to be successful is when you don't put in all of the work, when you try to take shortcuts, when you try to skimp on doing all those things that are important, when you aren't developing prospects. Those are the things that are going to come back and hurt you. Let's not do those so we can get out of the slump. Let's say we're salesperson's in a slump, but they're starting to get some successes. Let's talk a little bit about celebrating those successes so that they actually can stay positive and can work ahead and have realistic goals to make that happen. Any thoughts along those lines, Kevin?
Sean, I'd really like to take a few minutes and talk about setting realistic goals for salespeople. I've been victimized by this, and admittedly, I've done this before. I've set unrealistic goals. Realistic goals is not, hey, we missed quota by 10% this quarter. We've got to make that up at 100% next quarter. No, we've got to back it up and go back to the beginning of our defined sales process and look at our ideal client profile and make sure that we're talking to the right persona in the right way to fill the funnel. Realistic goals can be, hey, are you spending enough time networking? Are you spending enough time preparing for the next meeting? Am I, the sales leader, spending enough time understanding the deal and making sure it's not a salesperson has gotten happy ears talking to the wrong people because they're a really big brand and they don't really fit our sales process? Thinking about realistic goals comes down to right action and activity. It's not volume of emails, it's not number of impressions, it's right activity at the right time for the right prospect that we can adequately and effectively serve. And it's kind of a numbers game and kind of not. It's numbers and finesse. If I need 10 new leads, am I doing the activities that are going to get me the right 10 leads? And then building that. It's kind of like a visual analogy of the stone rolling over and gathering moss as you proceed down your sales process. Start with the rock, the lead, roll it over once, get the right people stuck to the lead, getting all those things and pieces of the puzzle in place.
I agree 100%. The issue of, do you have the right leads? Do you have the right message? One of the things that I will do with a salesperson that is in a quote unquote slump is I'll do some more play acting or role playing with that salesperson to make sure that they are actually delivering the message for the company that we've decided is a good message. Let's be realistic of that as well, that we actually have a message that makes sense for that salesperson's target market. Maybe marketing and sales management have missed the ball a little bit on that as well. Let's be honest with ourselves. if we haven't been coaching that salesperson to address their available market with the right message. Let's practice that. Let's make sure that's rock solid. And that way we can make sure that that salesperson is going after the right kind of opportunities. Because the thing that we need to be very cautious of is that we aren't impatient with that salesperson that's just hit a bad time. We need to give that salesperson confidence that they can be successful and be patient with that salesperson to let them work their way through it and let them build up their pipeline. Make sure that they're talking to the right people and reward them, pat them on the back that they did a good job and they were successful in getting the right appointments. All those things will contribute to getting out of the slump in the future.
Absolutely. I think I found myself saying absolutely or 100% or very much agree a lot here. I think the reason is because we've done this a lot. We know what to do. One thing to avoid for those of you new in your leadership is just trying to step in and help that person sell. You'll notice that Sean and I haven't said, hey, go help them sell. Now, we've said, make sure that we're focusing and supporting them because that's about leadership. We're not doership, we're leadership. And helping somebody get out of the slump is a personal journey. We've seen a lot of the great general managers of baseball clubs and coaches and pitchers walk this line on a game by game basis. You can hear the announcers on TV probably in your mind to say, I'm glad he gave him that time on the mound to keep pitching. Yeah, he walked 4 or had 3 innings where he really struggled, but that last inning, he really got himself out of that slump and into a groove. Selling for someone will not get them into a groove.
Absolutely. I joke about this. You've heard me do this. The coach never walks on the field and takes over, walks on the court and takes over and does the play for the player. And that's the same thing for the sales leader. You shouldn't do that. What you need to do is make sure that all the fundamentals are correct. Just like the batting coach works with the batter, make sure that your swing is level and they watch tape and they look for what they're supposed to be doing correctly. They make those little fine-tune adjustments for the player that's not hitting well, but they tell them, go out there and hit that ball. And they know that you get enough swings after doing the right kind of practice. If you're following our practice, if you're following those things that we learned in practice, and you're out there doing it, you're going to connect eventually and you're going to work yourself out of that slump. And it's okay to go through that process because you get better. You also learn as a salesperson how you can be successful. Not just that you are successful, but how you actually can be successful. And you learn the technique to get you out of the slump yourself. Let's face it, we may not all have a great sales leader that can help us. And if we're salespeople, you work your way out of it yourself. And part of that comes from, what am I doing wrong? Being honest with myself. And how do I do it right? And let's go back to the basics. Let's make sure I'm doing the basics. And you can work yourself out of a slump without even having a good sales leader to help you through the process.
Absolutely. And Sean, I'm looking at the time here and we're right at 15 minutes. It's amazing how fast we can move through good content when there is something that's applicable to all of our past experiences and the people who are experiencing them real time right now. If you are just joining us for the first time, it may be beneficial for you to go back to our previous podcast, Rewarding Effort and Results During Sales Meetings. The question I would have if this were my first podcast listening to, I would say, well, what is rewarding those successes and what does coaching people out of a slump look like? We talk about that at length in catching people doing things right earlier in the process. Thank you all for joining us for this episode of Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. So we're really appreciative that you're here and that you're coming back to listen to and download us more. Until next time, happy selling. And that's a wrap. Thanks again for joining Kevin and Sean on Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. Tune in every Tuesday or when our podcast drops every Tuesday at 4:30, wherever you consume your podcast. And don't miss our monthly CEO workshop where we unpack some of the big CEO questions facing your business. Until next time, we're looking forward to seeing you. Happy selling.